It was designed, in our minds, it's always designed to culture and place.
We knew very early on that we had to do something very special and that the building had to tell the story of the people of the Emirates.
My focus at Moriyamaa Teshima has been cultural work, museums in particular, museums, university, and educational buildings, let's say. And museums are definitely a form of education. So we're excited by that portfolio and by cultural projects in general. We came over and did about a year of design work before this concept emerged and became the sort of final concept for the building. So we used that year to sort of research the history here, of course, steep ourselves in the culture and the light of Dubai and the light of the UAE, and to understand the land that we were building in here.
When we looked at it, we kind of recognized that this was a culture that was born by the pen. It was really a culture that was created by the pen, and by that I mean it was born of a constitution.
We were inspired by, essentially the mandate of the museum, which is to tell a very specific story, a story about the founding of the UAE, the writing of the constitution, the signing, but most importantly, the gathering of consensus of the 7 leaders of the UAE. And we were inspired, I'd say, in particular by that story because it's a story about bringing together and dialogue and then coming to an agreement by use of a pen at the end of the day. The writing and the signing of the Constitution is about the word and the pen and the signing of an agreement, making an agreement, which is essentially the founding of a nation.
The image that we chose to really spur that story was an iconic image, by now iconic, of Sheikh Zayed signing. It was a close-up shot, kind of from lower down, looking up. So his hand was oversized, and the pen really dominated that image. The pen, his hand as he was writing. And the pen was on an angle because it was in motion and he was writing. And so that kind of became, for us, where we were going to start.
That became the metaphor and the kind of symbolism that we built on. It started with, I think the first move was to come up with the move for the pavilion. So the building actually is composed of several elements. It has a presence on site, and then but most of the building actually is below grade, and that may be not even obvious to the visitor, but the vast majority of the building is actually below grade. And that was specifically because we wanted to preserve the site, the historic site of this signing of the Constitution, writing and signing of the Constitution. And so the site has become a park, and we preserved as much of that as we could. And one of those existing buildings is the guest house. It's a long linear building, and the way the site was configured, it made sense to kind of echo the memory of guest house on the other side, and reflected, I guess you could say, like a book, opposite Union House. So essentially Union House is that center of the site, the center of where the Constitution was created, and the guest house and the pavilion for the museum are kind of bookends or open pages of a book, you could say.
You know, inspiration behind a lot of the forms that you see around you, a lot of the expression comes from the UAE. So whether it's the color palette, the selection of stones, the different textures of stones, so surrounding Union House, the kind of shell around Union House down below, we went for a split face, a rough split rock to kind of reference the rugged mountainscapes that you have at Fujairah. The dunescapes are present also through the kind of cladding around Union House. as well as the columns, the kind of cladding around the columns. So the language, the materiality of the, the spirit of the land, the spirit of the landscape and the nature, which was a real integral part of Emirati identity, because there was a deep connection to the landscape, a deep understanding of the landscape, because the people, the forefathers lived off the land. So that really informed all our material choices and the majority of our expression of this material and the form in the buildings.
The pavilion was essentially formed from a piece of paper, a wrapping piece of paper. And it's held in place by the 7 columns, the 7 pens of the 7 Emiratis. So that's how the story starts. And it's, as I say, it's sort of got that sweeping motion. So it sweeps you down in a way, down this sort of long, gentle stair and ramp into the spaces of the actual museum. We thought of the space as being the ramp and the stairs and the elements of circulation as essentially being the ink of the pen. And the pavilion is the paper. And in a way that makes Union Hall the center at the inkwell. So the ramps, the stairs, all of these curves, even the memories of those curves in the ceilings are all essentially memories of the ink. And so we were inspired, the shapes of those were inspired by calligraphy that is so beautiful. I mean, the desert, the sands, and the calligraphy. Calligraphy was inspired by the same thing. It's an artistic spin, I guess you could say, on writing a practical statement.